Okay, today we'll be discussing about event line breaking in Splunk, okay, using the props.conf file. So if you see, if you follow my previous video where I have discussed the different phases a data goes through before we search the data, right? So the event line breaking happens at the parsing phase, right? Where at the input phase we get the raw data, and then at the parsing phase the event line breaking happening using the different configurations we have. Based on that, what kind of data we are dealing with. So whatever configurations will be seeing today, that will be applicable for the parsing phase. Okay, that means based on your server settings, you need to place your props.conf file to the server component where it's basically dealing with the parsing of the data. So that means if you have this architecture, then indexer you have to place your props.conf file, because indexer is doing the parsing. Okay, so now today mainly we'll be discussing about these settings. Okay, these are the settings which are applicable at the parsing phase. Now, there are a couple of settings which you can do it at the input level as well in the universal forwarder. I'll try to briefly explain them. And while discussing them, we need three of the settings for timestamp extraction, and which we'll be using today. Now, for timestamp extraction, we'll be seeing in separate video for other settings. Okay, so before I start, so generally this happens whenever you have a new kind of data in your system, right? And you want to build a logic basically which will create the events from those raw data. So that means you want to basically create this props.conf file logic, different settings, right? You want to explore with. Then generally it is a good idea to create a new text file with those data, and then come over here in this settings, add data. Okay, and there upload that text file, and then try with different options, and you can see live how Splunk is breaking those events. Okay, then accordingly you have to uh, tweak those settings, and then you will get your final props.conf. So for today, let us talk about before I discuss any of these events or any of these settings. Let us talk about how Splunk treat the raw data. Okay, so suppose we can have our incoming data something like this. Okay, I'm just giving you an example, something like this. So in each and every line we have some information. Okay, so now by default Splunk basically treats each and every line. So before creating any event, okay, by default Splunk breaks at each and every line. Okay, now based on the settings of should line merge or not, there is a settings called should line merge. Okay, based on these settings, this settings basically tells Splunk whether all my events are single line events or a multiple line events. So for multiple line events, the should line merge will be true. For single line events, should line merge will be false. Okay, now should line merge basically, as you have seen, by default it is breaking at the new line level, right? Whenever it finds a new line, it's basically creating a new line of event. And based on, so if I say should line merge equals to true, and suppose I have some kind of settings like this, so Splunk will create two events like this. Okay, so if my should line merge equals to false, so Splunk will create event for each line. Okay, so this is how it works, should line merge. Now should line merge is basically defaulted to this new line. To override that, you have this line breaker rule. So here you can give any kind of regular expression which will tell Splunk that instead of new line, take this regular expression as a line breaker or the new line replacement. Okay, we'll discuss that one as well. Mm, so before our first file we will discussing today is data 3. Okay, so where we'll start with line merge, or line breaker, basically line underscore breaker. So let us see the data first. Okay, so if I open the data 3 file, okay, if you see, it's a raw XML, right? It has messages tag, different kinds of different messages tag. Inside this messages tag, it has message tag as well. So what I want to break is each and every message tag combination should be a single event. That is what I want to achieve now. Okay, so now if you see, I have just have this kind of data as a raw text file, right? So what I'll do, I'll come over here, I will upload that data 3. Okay, I'll come to next. Now if you see, this window comes up, right? So by default, the unbreaked event has been kept on over here at the right side window. Now the left side window, if you see, there are three options called event breaks, timestamp, and advanced. So we will be in advance, whatever configurations you can have it, right? You can put it one by one. Now event breaks also, you can put a regex, so that value is basically for the break only before also. So either you can use this break only before in the advance, or you can give this regular expression over here, it will create a break only before. Okay, we'll see that. And timestamp is basically for the timestamp extraction from your event, which we'll be discussing in a separate video. For now, we'll just try to see how Splunk breaks each and every event. Okay, how it creates now. Let us. So we have already have this data 3, right? So for data 3, so I'll be saying my line breaker should be what, at the message end level, right? So if we, okay, let me, I think I have closed the data 3. Let me open that. So that means at the each and every messages, that this should consider as my line breaker instead of new line, right? So that's why I have given that. So we can come over here, we can add a new settings, give line breaker, and give this regular expression. Okay, so let us, this is a very simple regular expression which will test it over here. Okay, so for that, what will I'll go to data 3, copy this text, come over here and give this regular expression. Okay, so what will happen, if you see, it is just identifying all the messages tag, opening messages tag, not the closing one, right? That means it should break before any opening messages tag coming up. Okay, that's my line breaker concept. So generally we don't use should line merge equals to true with the line breaker, but I will keep this one just to show you how it works. So now if you see, uh, this is a single event, right? And with all this raw data, so if I apply this setting now, if you see, the line breaker just Splunk just what it is, it applies this line breaker rule, but it's still not created any new event. Okay, it just applies this line breaker rule, but it's showing us it is breaking, it is considering each and every line at the messages tag level whenever a new messages tag is getting opened. Okay, okay, so now we will break this into a event. So for do that, uh, as you see from this data, I know from where my new events are starting up, right? It is from the messages tag, whenever a new message tag is getting opened, right? So for that, whenever you know from where the new events can come up, they can be generated, you can use this particular settings called break only before. Okay, so here also you'll be using similar kinds of settings, break only before, new settings. So what we'll do, we'll give this messages tag, opening messages tag, right? So it should break only before that. So if I apply that now, if you see, Splunk already break those messages tag. For each and every messages tag, it is created a new event. So if I just go back to before applying this break only before, you will see. So if you see, Splunk is breaking whenever it is getting that particular regular expression occurrence as a event, new event. Okay, so this is how break only before works. Okay, so I'll just put it back over here. So break only before, and the messages, opening messages, right? So there is another settings called must break after. That means Splunk will automatically break that event whenever it is find that regular expression. There also you can give that regular expression. So must break after generally you use when your ending of that event is so you know where your event is getting end. Mm, but you may not have the proper information when your event may getting start. Okay, we'll see one example for that. So here I can apply this one as well to make this particular settings more robust, right? So here I'm saying whenever it is finding the closing messages tag, it should break as well. So it should give me similar events right there. Okay, so this is how it is basically doing that. So this is how you basically do this break only before and must break after. Now if you see, this XML tag is also coming over here, so I can always use should line merge false, so that it will be in a separate line. Mm, and all my messages tag will be in separate event. So you can always ignore this particular event. Generally you should not be putting this particular XML tag as an event, but I just took a raw XML file, that's why I just show you this one. Okay, so we saw how this setting works. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about uh, this file. Okay, where we will try to break through timestamp. Okay, so data2, we have another file, data2. So let's see this file. It's a very simple event file where we have some information here, we have our timestamp over here, some other information after that. Okay, we will tell Splunk break these events based on the timestamp whenever you find the timestamp. Okay, so similar way, I'll go back, I'll select the data2.txt file, I will click on next, and then I'll try to break on based on the timestamp, right? So there is a settings called this settings break only before date. Okay, so if I so this can take true or false value. So if I say true, okay, in that case you need to give some time format identification. So that's why we will be discussing this three time extraction stuff. Okay, so the one is called the time prefix. That means if you have any kind of prefix before the timestamp start, you can give. For us it is GMT, so we'll be giving GMT. Okay, so then we have our time format, what kind of date format it is. So it's YMD, then T, then the time and the time zone. We have this format, so I already have this format, so I'll be copying this. And there is another format called max timestamp look ahead. So what it do, what basically, if you copy this stuff over here, okay, and now if I just remove this GMT portion, so the maximum length is 24. If you see here, length is 24, so that length we have to give over here. Okay, so if I apply this, now if you see, Splunk started creating new events whenever it is identifying a new timestamp over there. So this is how it works. So let's talk about more settings. So we have discussed about must break after, right? So there is another settings called must not break break before, and must not break after, and must not break before. So must not break after is just opposite of must break after, right? Must break after is telling us if you find this particular regular expression, break over there, create a new event from the from next string onwards. Now must not break after is saying me like Splunk should not break over there. Okay, it should continue. There could be a lot of scenarios in which you need to use this one. So I'll give an example with this data. I think I have data 4 must not break before, yes. So I'll just show you the data. It's a very simple event where suppose I am running some batch job, and that batch job is printing something over here, and I want to analyze that. So my events could be looking like this, right? So the jobs, each and every state of the job, like whether a particular statement succeeded or not, whether it is some request has been sent or not, it's some file has been copied or not, then the batch job completed, then try to finish the press any key, right? So I always wanted to break as a to finish press any key, right? So let me go back over here, data 4, right? So now click on next, right? So now all the raw data is coming together. I'll go to advanced again. So I'll go to props.conf. I'll say must break after equals to that string to finish, press any key, correct? So if I apply this, it is creating that event, two events for me. I just give you an example of must not break before. Okay, so in this case what will happen, this it will not create an event before that. Okay, so batch task has been completed. So okay, apply settings. So that means you can make it more robust. Maybe it is not the best example, but in lot of scenarios you may need this must not break before. Okay, so it should, that means Splunk will not break over here. Okay, so must not break before, you can think of it just opposite of break only before. Okay, so we talk about a lot of configurations here. Mm, talk about data 2, yes. We talk about data 3, yes. Data 4. Data JSON will give a simple example. But before that, let's talk about Truncate and Max events, okay? So now I have given you an example, right? How Splunk breaks the events, right? Now it could happen, and this is basically true for your multi-line events. Truncates basically tells us how many characters maximum can be there in each line, and I think the default is 10,000. Okay, and max generally tells us how many lines maximum you can have in your events. I think this is defaults to 256. Okay, so now you can always override this, but be very careful on that part, because generally in general sense, you will never cross this limit, but if you cross, there is a high chance that you are ingesting bad data in your system. So be very careful on that front. uh, Apart from that, okay, so there are two other configurations called event breaker enabled and event breaker. You can do it at the universal forwarder level. That means this will be applicable at the data input level, right? Because universal forwarder is always deals with your input. I'm talking about input phase here, this input phase here, right? So here you can use a very low level of event breaker over there. So to do that, you need to enable this event breaker enable equals to true in the props.conf. Okay, and you can give a regex over here. So that using that regex you can divide. So Splunk will do this very low level of event breaking, so that this is generally useful when and you have multiple indexer and universal forward is sending data to all these indexers, so the load balancing will be better in the server. Okay, we also talked about this timestamp extraction. Now if you see, let's take our final example, then I'll show you that one. So we have another file called data underscore json. If you see, it's a json file, but I saved it in a text because Splunk is intelligent enough. If it's find it's a json format, then it automatically format, so I won't be able to apply my settings over there. So if you see, I have this kind of data. I have two events basically here, right? It's basically a donut data, and what kind of donut it is, and how the donut is been getting prepared, like what kind of batter I used, those kind of data. It's just a simple data, funny data I wanted to create, so I created like this. So if you see, the events are separated by this one, right? Then curly bracket, then our this bracket, and then curly bracket end. So we'll try to see how we can create events based on this kind of data. So I'll go back, I'll select data JSON, I'll click on next. Now if you see, raw data is there. So if you see, I know already from where my event is getting break, right? So I can just give break only before equals to that. So now break only before, I'll show you from here. Event breaks, as I told you, in event breaks, if you give any regex, right, that creates not only this particular configuration. So if I give this one, so Splunk is basically creating those events, right, two different events. And if I go to advanced, if you see, break only before only it has added to this one. So now you have two options from here. Either you can copy these configurations, okay, so that if you already have your props.conf, you can copy this configuration to paste it over there, or you can save it using this save as. Suppose I give demo, right? And category I choose custom, app I choose, let's say, search and reporting, so that the props.conf will be saved in search and reporting app. I'll click on save. Okay, so now if you see, if I go to my Splunk home, right, I go to etc apps, and then I go to search app, right? If I go to search app local folder, this props.conf has this demo stanza, right, and all these settings. So as I told you, we are doing it for the parsing level, and as we have different kinds of file, so that's why it is a source type level configuration, if you see it here. So now what we can do in the next time onwards, if I go back, I have this data just json underscore json.txt selected, right? If I click on next, instead of applying this file, I can select this source type from here. Splunk will automatically apply that. If you see, the result is same. So this is how it works. The whole cycle works. So if I have some raw data, you get the sample, some of the sample of the data, come over there, do the experiment, save it in a splunk.conf, and use that particular source type everywhere. And if you see, wherever you go in Splunk data inputs, everywhere you will have an option in Splunk. Each and every input you will have option to give the source type. So you can always give that source type you have created. Then accordingly, Splunk will break those raw data into events. Hopefully it will be useful to you guys. See you in next video.